Hari Om. Thank you, Niranjan, for the wonderful welcome, introduction, and function. I am greatly honored to be here with you again. And I am most honored to be nearby your parents again, who were my very close friends and teachers for many years. Dr. Raman was not simply an astrologer. He was a great statesman, educator, guru, one of the leading minds, visionaries, and guides in India for many decades. We miss his presence since he has passed on, but we still feel his grace and inspiration, and I feel him with me regularly, and I don't want to be taking up any space, but I must say, Niranjan, I also feel like at great extent he is also my father, and he is also my mother. In fact, I remember with your mother, one of the last times I saw her, she held my hand and looked into my eyes and said, "Please take me to America with you." But they were very wonderful people, and I think they would be very happy. I've been to Bangalore many times. I have not been so active in Bangalore recently. Dr. Raman used to arrange various talks and activities for me. We also used to do regular programs on ancient India through the Mythic Society, and M.B. Kamat was a good friend of ours, and S. Rajaram, and many other groups, particularly S. Vyasa, has done very great work, and we were with them in January. Presently, we are staying and doing a program, Ayurvedagram, where we're doing some of our Ayurvedic activity. So, I'm very happy to see all of you here, and I'm also very honored to be with Swamiji. I have heard his name, I have known of his work, his face is also well known, so I'm very happy to be with him and to be able to hear his wisdom as well. The Vedas has been the main subject of my work and research over all these years. And studying the Vedic teachings, I have been led to work in a number of these related Vedic fields. Different aspects of yoga, Vedanta, Jyotish, of course, and Ayurveda, but also study of the Vedas, and even cultural issues and history relative to the Vedas. On March 27th, I'll be giving the annual lecture for ICHR, the Indian Council of Historical Research in Delhi, on the whole issue of ancient India. And we're also having a conference with Professor B.B. Lal, the former director of the Archaeological Survey of India. And we hope to put to rest, finally, this idea that the Vedic people or the Vedic culture came from the outside. It is our view that the Vedic culture came from India itself, and all the information is with us. The geology of the Saraswati River, Saraswati Drishadvati, as the Vedic homeland, genetic information showing that the Indian population didn't come from the outside, but to some extent moved out. The archaeology that Professor Lal has examined quite well, the astronomical references in Vedic text and the Jyotish that show dates 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 years ago or more. So we're reaching a place where we can create a new historical timeline about ancient India, connecting the literature of the Vedas all the way back with the earliest finds of agriculture and village civilization, which now can be traced 10,000 years ago in Haryana. Tonight I won't speak about the history specifically, but I wanted to address that issue as well. My original approach to Vedas was through Sri Aurobindo's yoga, and his deep study in his books like Secret of the Veda and Hymns to the Mystic Fire, examining the deeper yogic implications of the Vedic mantras, which I began with a series of translations in January of 1980. So I've had a few years of that. And then my latest book, Vedic Yoga, The Path of the Rishi, is also arguing that point, that most of what we call yoga, Raja Yoga, Hatha Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Karma Yoga, and much of what we call Vedanta doesn't start with the Upanishads alone, but can be traced back to verses of Rig Veda itself. Even this Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, which has this famous Mahavakya, Aham Brahmasmi, also then quotes Rig Veda and says this was also seen by the Rishi Vamadeva, who said, Aham Abhavam Suryas Cha. I was Manu and the sun. Manu not just the first person, but the Adi Purusha. And sun Surya, not just meaning the sun as a globe in the sky, or even as a Devata, but the Aditya Purusha, the Purusha that dwells in the sun, or the supreme Paramatma, that is the nature of light and illumines the entire universe. Over the years, studying these various Vedic disciplines, I've also urged for their integration of yoga, Ayurveda, Jyotish, Vedanta, and also the related sciences and disciplines. Recently, we had a conference in Bangalore relative to yoga, Ayurveda, and Vedanta. Baba Ramdev also came to that particular conference. So they had the three, but they did mention aspects of the Jyotish as well, because all these teachings are connected, each has its place, and each has its importance overall. For example, Ayurveda is the Vedic discipline for healing of both body and mind, physical and psychological issues. Yoga is actually the Vedic discipline for purifying the mind, particularly if we talk about the Patanjali Raj Yoga, and developing the Sattva Guna, taking us beyond the gunas. Ayurveda deals with the balancing of the doshas, so sometimes we could even say that Ayurveda deals more with the biological factors, yoga deals more with the psychological, spiritual factors, and we have the Jyotish as the science of time and karma, and Vastu as the science of space. So we have the healing of body and mind, and the proper understanding of space and time, which we do not find even in the modern physics. Modern physics has yet to discover all the subtle forces that exist behind the universe. The entire universe manifests from consciousness, is pervaded with prana, and is an expression of a greater divine will and awareness. So this brings us to the theme that we'll be looking at as a point of integration, which is the Agni. And we have already brought the Agni into play. Everywhere, every function that is done, the Agni must be honored first. The Agni is the divine light. But what is the Agni? Vedas begin with Agni, Agnim Ile, Agnim Ile Purohitam Yajnasya Devam. Who is the Agni? And we understand the teachings of the great modern Vedic gurus like Sri Aurobindo, Kavyakanta Ganapati Muni, Brahmarshi Devarat, and these great teachers who have taught the deeper meaning of the Vedic yoga. The yajna always twofold. There is the Bahir Yaga, which is the outer offering, the Havan, the homa, the fire offering, in which specific outer substances are offered into the sacred fire for various purifications, purifying the atmosphere, drawing in a sattvic energy or divine presence, dealing with various karmic issues, and so forth. But there is also simultaneously the antaryaga, or the inner sacrifice. The inner sacrifice is yoga, in which we offer speech, mind, prana to divine light, the divine fire dwelling within us. And it is the point, the teaching of these great Vedic gurus, that from the very beginning of the Vedic period, the yajna was both outer and inner. If we study Bhagavad Gita, 4th chapter, you'll see how pranayama, pratyahara, sanyama, yogic practices are defined as yajnas. But this is not a new invention. This is the very essence of the Vedic teaching. So who is the Agni, or what is the Agni that we find in the Vedas? This is explained more clearly in the Upanishads, Agni as the Angushta, Matra, Purusha, the divine flame of awareness within the heart. And in the work of Kavyakanta Ganapati Muni was the chief disciple of Bhagwan Ramana Maharshi. Everything that is in Sanskrit about Bhagwan, including all the poems and mantras about him, are from Ganapati. Ganapati composed probably the greatest modern Sanskrit work called Uma Sahasram, 1,000 verses in the praise of Uma, 40 chapters. Each chapter is in a different Sanskrit meter. He covers every possible meter there. But in his explanation of the Agni, he says the Agni, first of all, is Jivatma. Particularly in his form as the Jata Vedas. Jata Veda in the Vedic sense, meaning he who is the knower of birth, the inborn soul. And the purpose of the Vedic yajna is to develop that inner flame, that divine awareness of the Jivatma, to the Paramatma, which is explained or regarded in the Vedic hymns more as the Vaishwanara form of Agni. In the Upanishadic thought, the Vaishwanara occurs in of course, the Mandukya, relative to the the states of waking, dream, deep sleep. But in the Vedic thought, Vaishwanara is the Turiya state, not just simply the waking state. And all these forms that we see in the Mandukya would relate then ultimately to the Jivatma, Paramatma, or movement of Agni. And what we find, the Vedic language is a kavya language. It is a language of poetry and vision where we have many different levels of meaning existing at the same time. So there are forms of Agni throughout the universe, just as there are forms of Vayu or electrical energy that exist on many levels, outwardly and inwardly, just as there are forms of the Ananda, the Soma force, just as there are forms of the light form, the Surya force. The Rishi was able to understand how the universe is created by sound and light, pranava, prakasha, and how these manifest, connect, and how the same laws that occur on one level will also occur on another level. We can also go back to the Taittiriya Upanishad, where we have the teaching of the 5 koshas, that is well known to you. And you begin with the Annamaya kosha, and then of course the Agni, the Agni relates to the Annamaya kosha. But the Taittiriya ends with the universal Agni, the supreme Agni for who devours the entire universe, that is the eater of all. So the same principle on one level exists relative to the other. And what we are doing in yoga is cultivating these inner forms, inner fires, and inner power. Shvetashvatara Upanishad speaks of the Yogagni, the fire of yoga that purifies the body. And it's interesting, when this Upanishad speaks of yoga, it speaks in terms of Vedic verses, verses from mainly Rig Veda and Shukla Veda in the second Adhyaya. And there's a very interesting verse from the Rig Veda where they say, Yunjante manasa uta yunjante dio, vibra viprasya brihato vipaschitaha.